About 10 or 11 years ago, I met Stanley Whitman, who was the founder and CEO of Bal Harbour Shops, only to do an article for Wall Street Journal magazine about him and his brothers, who were famous surfers in Florida, back in the 40s and 50s, and kind of amazing. And they used to make these 18-foot long surfboards out of teak, out of thin strips of teak, and they're the most beautiful objects. They still have about 5 of them in their collection. I think it's the History Museum in Miami has some of them. So we got, the photographer came down, we got out these amazing boards, and Stanley sat there. He was already in his 80s, and I don't think he felt very well. So I don't know, it fell apart. But we started talking about the shops, and he invited me to come to lunch the next week. And he was fascinating. I mean, he was just, I had no interest in shopping centers or retail or any of that, absolutely. And I would have never thought of doing a book. And at the end of the lunch, he said, would you ever consider doing a book about a place like this? And I said, I don't think so, but I really enjoyed talking to you. And then I thought about it more, and he kept sending me notes, and I said, yeah, let's talk about it. And so we just started having lunch once a week. And he was an incredible he only died last year at 97. And he was an incredible raconteur. His memory just got better the more we spoke. And I started to think this could be the kind of book I've never done before. In fact, I don't know if I've ever seen a book like this. Kind of a mix of family history, memoir, personal memoir, urbanism. I mean, he really helped to shape not just Bal Harbour, but all of Miami. Retail, the history of retail, reinventing the idea of what a shopping center could be. And it's still today the most successful, square foot by square foot, it's the most successful shopping center in the world, financially. And then also, the history of fashion, because that's what he did. He had the idea of bringing high fashion, high design in. And he started with this woman named Martha, who was extremely successful in New York. And she also had a shop in Palm Beach. And she opened this amazing it was the only 2-level shop in the center that was all otherwise just one story. And she brought in Valentino, Versace. No, maybe she didn't bring Versace, but she brought in Valentino and 5 or 6 other, well-known young European designers who'd never done collections in America before, and they did special collections. Then Versace came in a few years later, had his own store there. Courrèges had his own store there. So that was the idea, and then I just wrote the book from interviews with him, and then he opened up all their archives, which were a mess. I mean, it wasn't like an archives. It was just like, oh, there's a closet there, there's a attic over here that might have some stuff. And that's, Barbara's position as designer would normally be waiting till everything was gathered and then work with it. But she got involved with me very early on, just being like archaeologists, going through this material. No one in the center had ever really bothered to find out about it and put it together. So the first job was just finding this stuff, and it kept opening up, and we kept discovering more and more, and that was interesting. That was kind of interesting. And I suddenly realized, well, you could almost do like On the Road, follow this guy's thinking. And in some ways, he was a real genius, in terms of marketing. One of my favorite chapters is just, I mentioned this last night, is that he just started to drive around the country. He would make lists of virtually every shopping center in the country. I mean, the dinkiest little place, in some subdivision to these huge sprawling malls in the Midwest. And he visited everyone, he interviewed everybody, he did reports on all the shops. He had a really good Leica camera, had a very good eye, and he was a good photographer, and he documented all of them. Then he had his secretary back in Florida, organized all these images and this information he'd gathered, and was really meticulous. I was just fascinated by that. So, instead of writing a book about an artist who works in a certain way, or an architect, or even a writer or musician, with this creative goal of creating a symphony or a mural or a building, this guy had this vision of this gem-like retail experience, and the idea was to have everything open air, unlike all these big boxes that are air conditioned. And you walk through this lush jungle-like landscape, and you go into the individual stores, and nothing like it had been ever done. And that became kind of interesting. I love projects that don't seem to fit into, I mean, I did a huge book. It's still the book that people use at universities on the history of the airport, cultural history of the airport, because there wasn't one. And that dawned on me one day when I'd run a design competition for a new airport on Long Island. And there just was, I went to the library, New York Public Library, and every place. There wasn't a book. There was sort of, and that was a very difficult, that was 10 years of research. But to me, that was the challenge. That was fun, that's a good idea. No one else has done it, and it's difficult. That's, economically, it's not smart.